Welcome to Akshara Yoga School YouTube channel. This is the third and final discourse on the concept of Abhyasa and Vairagya. So far we have seen that Abhyasa and Vairagya are the two foundation stones of yoga to help us achieve the highest goal of freedom or moksha or self-realization. Abhyasa and Vairagya, they are the two interrelated concepts which has to be practiced together. Both are inseparable. Within the practice itself, there is the element of non-attachment or Vairagya. If we go on practicing without the awareness of the inbuilt component of Vairagya, our entire practice will remain lopsided, and hence there is no chance of inner transformation or growth, because since we know that the present state of our existence is already lopsided, because we go on thinking and thinking. There are thoughts, large number of thoughts coming up again and again. This is known as vritti, and to remove these vritti we take the path of yoga. It means that we have to bring our this lopsided mind, which is heavily loaded with vrittis, into a state of balance, and for that we need a balanced practice, a balanced path. That is why Abhyasa and Vairagya is the balanced path when it is practiced together. So Abhyasa is the practice and Vairagya is the non-attachment. We put the effort and then we drop the effort. When we drop the effort, we observe internally the changes that happens within the body, within the mind. With this awareness, with this component of consciousness, conscious awareness, we move again into the practice, fully aware and fully alert, go deep, penetrate into the practice of asana, practice of pranayama, and finally we bring ourselves out of that practice. Again we observe ourselves carefully like a witness. So this observing like a witness is Vairagya. In practice you are holding on to something. You cannot do practice until unless you are attached to something or you are holding something, and the very dropping of that is Vairagya. So both have to come together. Until unless we start our practice, there is no chance of change or growth or achieving our goal, and until unless we drop the practice, again there is no chance of transformation. Because if you holding on to practice, you go on practicing, it means you have transformed yourself in the form of practice, which is another vritti. But in yoga you have to transform yourself into nothingness. It is the nothingness that has to be achieved, and that is why very carefully with Abhyasa and Vairagya we move forward. As we continue the path of Abhyasa and Vairagya, we remove the unnecessary parts, unnecessary elements that go into our practice. For example, the component of ego, unnecessary fears, unnecessary attachments, so that continuously we can refine the practice, and finally we reach a state where we are doing the practice, but in fact we are not doing anything. What does this mean? It means that we have come to the level of meditation by refining our practice so much that we are now fully expert in dropping the entire practice, and yet we are fully aware and awake. Yet a lot of activity is happening, but at the same time nothing is happening. That is the culmination of practice and non-attachment. We have seen that this practice that we take into our life is nothing but a repetition of what that is stored inside us. We can only practice what we have learned, and that only we go on repeating again and again. So from where this repetition comes from? Now this repetition work is done by our lower brain, also known as the vegetative brain or the reptilian brain. So whenever we learn anything new, we engage the higher centers of the brain, because at that point of time we are fully alert and aware. Once that learning is done, the entire learning is programmed by the higher brain, and it is given to the lower brain so that it can be repeated again and again. Suppose we learned asana, how to practice halasana. As long as we are learning it, the system of the brain, the lower brain, which also works in the coordinated movements of the limbs and muscles, along with the higher brain, they all come together for the individual, to help the individual to grasp the learning. Once you have fully mastered the halasana, then the entire steps, the entire process of doing halasana will be programmed and given to the lower brain so that it can repeat it again and again. That's why repetition, mere repetition, will not bring change. So we bring this element of Vairagya. Now Vairagya is high awareness, witness. In Vairagya you are dropping and observing. How will you drop unless you are not aware that you are holding on to something? So what happens when this element of Vairagya is there? We upshift ourselves, we upgrade ourselves from lower brain to the higher centers, that is the neo-cortex or the cerebral region of the brain, which is highly sophisticated and highly developed region of the brain, very resourceful in nature, which has qualities like equanimity, calmness, compassion, peace. So that is why with Abhyasa and Vairagya we can achieve this state of inner calmness. And many times we hear from people who practice yoga that it has bring a certain kind of change, and that change is nothing but the upgradation or upshift from lower brain which is always has the nature of holding on to something fearful, getting angry, getting emotional frenzy. All such things are stored, or such things are produced by the lower brain. And with the help of Abhyasa and Vairagya, we can upshift ourselves to the higher brain, and naturally we experience changes in the form of inner calmness, clear thinking, always have the attitude of be a part of a solution rather than problem. because we are now operating from the topmost part of our brain. So that is why we say that the entire yoga is nothing but a process of de-automatization. What is de-automatization? It means that your yoga practice is not just a mere mechanical practice, a physical practice like a machine without any awareness. So when we bring this component of Vairagya, it cultivates inner awareness where you start observing your entire practice and also the changes that happens after the practice. So as soon as this component of awareness comes in, the functioning of the higher lobes of the brain comes into the picture. So when this higher brain comes into the picture, that is where the entire practice becomes de-automatized. Now it is not on the automation mode, it is on the conscious mode. And we say that yoga is a conscious path, it is a conscious activity for total personality development. So practice and non-attachment taken together, it takes us step by step from lower brain to the middle brain, which is the limbic system, and finally to the higher brain. To translate it into yoga philosophy, it says that the entire Abhyasa and Vairagya takes us from the level of tamas to rajas to sattva. So tamas is lethargy, laziness, confusion, fear, aggression, conflict, pain, suffering. And from there we move up to the midbrain, which is the seat of emotions, passion, love, hatred, attachment, aversions. And finally we come to the higher brain, which is the level of sattva, where there is purity, calmness, and an environment of high productivity, solution, and happiness. So finally we establish ourselves with the help of Abhyasa and Vairagya at the level of sattva, from where we function all our daily activities, which are always fruitful in nature, which are always meaningful, which are wholesome for our body and mind. At that level you are performing all the actions, yet you are not attached to any one of them. There is complete transformation. You may be appearing to do all the activities, but deep inside you, you are totally free. You have liberated yourself from the attachment of the work, from the sense of doership. Now you enjoy complete freedom. And this is what Gita says, karmane bhi pravrittopi naiva kinchit karoti saha. In spite of doing all the activities, or in spite of engaged in all the activities, the individual does not do anything. It means now the individual has totally liberated himself from the clutches of bondage of the body, bondage of the mind, emotions, and intellect. And this is the highest stage of yoga, known as moksha, samadhi, freedom.